Hello everyone, this is a day in the life of Linux, an open source BIOS user, January the 9th, 2011. This is episode number 9. Now I'm going to go into a little more detail about my Coreboot project, which I talked about in episode number 8, and mention some of the advantages of using an open source BIOS. Later on we'll talk about Project Trinity, which is a fork of the desktop environment KDE 3.5.10, and talk about KDE in general. And I'd also like to talk about what would make the ideal computer. Alright. One big plus with Coreboot and CBIOS, and that's SEA BIOS by the way, is you know what is in the code, which is excellent for security purposes, since you know exactly what is in the BIOS. Otherwise, you don't really know what's in there. You just got a binary blob and you don't really know what you've got in there. If you want to learn more about the low-level functions of your motherboard, Coreboot is certainly a great way to do that. Boot up times are much faster, and space permitting, you could put the Linux kernel in the BIOS itself. Now, I didn't mention this in episode number 8, but I'm just going to clarify this, that with Linux and Plan 9, you should be able to boot only using Coreboot. But FreeDOS and most other operating systems will require CBIOS, and also Windows will require CBIOS, because it needs those BIOS functions to boot properly. But Linux and Plan 9 don't. Okay, one observation on FreeDOS. The USB mouse will work fine, and in my case, I used a Logitech B100 USB mouse. In an effort to get away from the closed source Adobe Flash, I loaded Gnash, GNASH 0.8.4 from the Debian repositories. This is Debian Lenny in my case, and that was easy to install. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Let's just talk about Project Trinity a little bit. I upgraded Debian Lenny with Project Trinity, which is basically a fork of KDE, and they call it 3.5.12. It's derived from KDE 3.5.10, and that was also the same computer that I had Coreboot in CBIOS on a Gigabyte GA6BXC motherboard. One rather severe limitation is the flash chip on that board is only 256K. So I haven't really put the Linux kernel on that. Not even sure if that's big enough to do that, but there are other BIOSes that have larger capacity. Just a few more thoughts about ISA sound cards. I haven't as yet got the Jazz 16 ISA card to work under Linux, but I've looked around on the internet and I see that some people have managed to do that, and I don't think it's a big deal in my case, because I have the AC97 audio controller to fall back on, and that works fine. I have also seen some efforts to get the VIA VT82C686 to work under DOS, so the other way around, get the newer hardware to work under DOS. And I haven't been able to get that to work, but that's no big deal either. Just run old with old and new with new. Okay, improvements in Project Trinity from KDE 3.5.10. The run dialog has been given a proper file system auto-completion in addition to the standard history-based auto-completion. It has built-in ICC color profile support. ICC stands for International Color Consortium. and they made some improvements to some of the apps. KPF was improved and Contact was improved. Although I found that most of the applications were the same. Stuff like Kuka 0.44, KTurtle 0.6, and Console 1.6.6. It's still the same. Those haven't changed at all. So if you liked KDE 3.5.10, you probably also like Project Trinity. There's not a big difference between the two. Just to recap, I used Debian Lenny with Linux kernel 2.6.26, and I just note that that is almost the exact same kernel version as Vector Linux Classic. So very similar. I'm just going to make some quick comments on console, and that's spelt with a K. In case you're not familiar with KDE, a lot of the things, a lot of the applications and components start with the letter K. I'm using the sessions feature to have colored tabs for different SSH sessions, and also for the local console session. So the color-coded scheme I used was green for Vector Linux, blue for Debian Lenny, and purple for Fedora Core 1. And yes, I'm still using Fedora Core 1. Got to keep that 2.4 going. One can disable the sound system within KDE, and this greatly helps things like SDL type programs and audio command line audio players like MPlayer. So if you're having problems with the sound with some of these Linux programs, try disabling the KDE sound system. That might help. Okay, now on Vector Linux, I had some trouble with the Radeon driver, and I had to reconfigure XORG conf. I changed that back. I changed it to the VESA driver temporarily, but with some tweaking, I've been able to get it working 100%. And I'll just go into a little bit about the hardware I'm using. Specifically, this is the ATI Radeon 9550 card, which came out in 2004. And the motherboard is actually a QDI P6V694X. I'm having a devil of a time finding the manual for that board, by the way. Okay, that had USB 1.1. So it is an older board, and not sure exactly just how old it is, to tell you the truth. But okay, now I'd like to talk about the ideal computer, and let's think about the attributes of the ideal computer system and its peripherals. I have a lot to say on the subject. I'm not too happy with the direction that computers are going in, to tell you the truth. Now we will see that no store-bought computer will have all these attributes. So it is necessary to build the ideal computer yourself, and you'll learn a lot more by doing that. First of all, we want a free open source operating system, and you don't have to be limited to just one operating system. You could triple boot with the Linux distro of your choice, with Plan 9 and FreeDOS. Those are all open source operating systems. Okay, and now we want also, of course, we want a free open source BIOS. So basically, so far I've achieved those two things, so far so good. We want replacement parts that are easily available and not too expensive. We want the components to be modular so that replacement is easy. Okay, and of course we're going to find, this is the universal problem, as one's computer ages, it gets more and more difficult to find replacement parts. So the ideal computer itself may change over time. Okay, so we want, getting back to the BIOS briefly, we want the BIOS chip to be socketed and even beyond that, we don't want it just to be merely socketed. We like it to have a ZIF socket, like a zero insertion force socket for your BIOS chip. That's an easy modification to make to your motherboard, and this makes it much more easy to modify your BIOS. And you can obtain ZIF sockets for chips on eBay. In my case, I have a DIP chip. Okay, now when you're choosing a board, you want, if possible, you want Coreboot compatibility. So you might want to check the Coreboot website, coreboot.org, first before you go out and you get a board. It's desirable to have a higher capacity flash chip so you can put more stuff in the BIOS. And I'm a little disappointed with what I can do with the 256K limit. Now, the other attribute is that you want a lithium battery that won't corrode and leak acid onto your board. Some of the older computers, like Amiga 4000, had that problem. Their batteries leaked unless you had the foresight to take the battery out. And you want the lithium battery to be easily removable. A very common battery is a CR2032, which is available in a whole bunch of different places. It's a commonly used battery. Okay, regarding the motherboard, again, we want temperature sensors. A lot of boards don't have them, especially the cheaper ones. You want those temperature sensors because you want to monitor things like your CPU, and you don't want that to get too hot. Okay, it would be also nice to have a temperature sensor on the GPU or the graphics processing unit. Some of those GPUs get very hot, although I found that with the ATI cards, generally they don't get as hot as some. They're definitely not the worst when it comes to producing waste heat. Okay, in my opinion, the motherboard should not have the following. This is kind of tricky. I don't think it should have a sound card, network card, or a video card, because if that's all built onto the board, you can't really replace them if they go bad. So if you have PCI cards or an ISA card or an AGP card, all those cards are easy to take out and put back in again. Now, this is very hard to attain unless you're using older hardware. So as you can probably tell, I'm a fan of the older P3 boards, especially the Gigabyte board that I use for Coreboot. And an energy efficient CPU that doesn't produce a lot of waste heat is also very desirable, and I'm going to make the additional requirement that I want it to run at less than 30 watts under peak load, and the P3 Coppermine CPU has this property. Now, I know I haven't really done exhaustive research on this, and I know that there's probably other CPUs that are faster and they use less watts than the P3 Coppermine, although the Coppermine is very good. It doesn't get very warm at all. It's about 4 degrees above the ambient room temperature. And in general, you don't want a computer that uses a lot of wattage, and if possible, it'd be nice if you could get a CPU that doesn't require a fan, because a fan is a mechanical component and it could break. And also, it's my observation that computers that run cooler last longer. Okay, as I said, getting back to the video card, I have an ATI Radeon 9550, and it works good. Works good on Vector Linux. I've tested it for months. You want a high quality power supply, and you want a physical on-off switch on that power supply. Not all computer power supplies have an on-off switch actually on the outside of the power supply. Okay, now getting to the peripherals, you want peripherals that have well-documented communication protocols. For example, things like scanners, printers, and digital cameras. Now with the scanners in particular, you have to be careful because there's many scanners that don't have well-documented protocols. Just to give you a specific example, I have an HP 5200C and it works good. In fact, it's been a real tank. I've been using it every day for the past several years. And okay, this last point is kind of optional, but you probably want at least one ISA slot if possible for a legacy sound card, especially if you're interested in running old DOS games like with FreeDOS. It's very nice to have. All my experiments with PCI sound cards have been unsuccessful. I haven't got a single one working properly under FreeDOS. And by properly I mean where you can run the game 100% and it doesn't induce crashes. The emulation on the SB128 PCI card didn't really work out very well for me, and I don't think it's a really viable solution. Okay, there are other ways to deal with the lack of ISA slots. There's a company called Costronic that makes a PCI to ISA bridge card kit. The model number is CV71P-ISA, and you can look at their products on costronic.com. The way this works is you plug in the CV71P ISA bridge card into a PCI slot, and then you plug the ISA card into the bridge. So the ISA card is at a 90-degree angle to the bridge. Now you might think, oh, this doesn't sound too easy, and you'd be right. This is a more challenging homebrew type of project. If you're going to do it this way, you've got to be prepared to do some BIOS programming to get this to work. The project could be very educational, though. There's another way to do it. There's a company called ARS Technologies that makes a USB to ISA slot converter. If you need to use your ISA card, but your new computer or laptop lacks ISA slots, you can use the USB to ISA card to convert your USB port to a virtual ISA slot. It's not that inexpensive though, it's $150. And yes, it comes with Linux and Windows and Mac OS X drivers. It's probably easier to just find a used motherboard with an ISA slot, and that was the solution that I ended up using, and it worked really well for me. So in one computer I'm running multiple operating systems, and it's compatible. I can run my Linux games, I can run my DOS games. I'm quite happy. Okay, so that's about it for now. I'm just going to make one more comment on MySQL, and this is kind of new to me, and it might be old hat to other people, but it turns out that I run a Drupal forum, and Drupal runs on MySQL. And one of the problems that I experienced was I have a lot of spam user accounts. A lot of them come from Gmail, and there's various other free mail services where people they're abusing them to do spam ads on forums. So as a result of that, I find myself having to delete a lot of inappropriate usernames from the forum, and I just recently found out that if you do something like you write a little script, a set of MySQL commands, and you say, okay, let's stick it in fixdrupal.sh, you can do something like MySQL on the command line. You can just type in MySQL space -u space root and less than symbol for redirection, and then just type the name of the MySQL script, and so it's redirecting those commands into the MySQL program. So you could just do a whole bunch of things to clean up Drupal by issuing a series of MySQL commands. Okay, that's it for now. And I hope you enjoyed the show. And thanks for listening.